AC Milan will host Lecce. Christian Pulisic looking to continue his impressive start to the campaign, 5 straight games with a goal contribution. Sean Sullivan and Kyla Morris, who are plugged into such things, tell me that on social media there's a raging debate right now as to whether Christian Pulisic is world class. Now, world class is one of those nebulous terms. You ask 10 people what it means, you get 10 different answers. But I do think putting Pulisic into some sort of global context right now is interesting. When we talk about U.S. players, we tend to only talk about them in a U.S. context. Best American player right now, best American player ever. But if you expand it out, with what Pulisic's doing. You said on our last pod you think he's one of the best players in Serie A right now. I gave the stat last week that no Serie A player has more goal contributions than him since the start of last season. So where does he belong in this discussion of top blank players in the world, top players in the world at his position? What do you think?
So again, to your point, defining what world class is, I think, is important, and it is subjective. Ultimately, with the word "world" in it, there has to be some, I think, in my definition, there has to be some kind of worldwide recognition that supersedes the actual nationality of the player and all of those stories. It's not just playing at the international level, because that could apply to any type of player. But I think when I tried to think of it, and I was driving in this morning trying to think of what my definition, and maybe over the years it's changed, and maybe for you out there that are watching or listening, you have your own definition. But I look at it as this is a player that like I said, has transcended his or her nationality and is coveted by the best teams in the world and is coveted by teams throughout the world and certainly at the best leagues. I think in this moment, and this is obviously relative to the moment, which is what we were talking about earlier this week, there is an argument to be made that he is certainly at the top of his game. We have seen in the past, although it was during COVID, where he had that moment where we thought that trajectory was going to happen, and it took a little detour there. So I think that he is playing better right now than any time in the past. Maybe it's a logical type of progression in terms of growth, his physical and mental growth that happens to any type of player. But I think that there are teams all over the world that in this particular moment, if you could say, would you like to have Christian Pulisic? The vast, vast majority would say yes. And I think that qualifies him being world class. I think that when you ask the best players around, when I was down in Monterrey this weekend with all of these incredible players, if I had asked them to talk about in the current moment an American player, I think almost all of them would point to Christian Pulisic and what he is doing. But I don't know. I guess what's your definition first off of world class?
I guess good enough to play on any team in the world and be a contributing player for. Is that fair?
But do you have any doubt that, I mean, I know it's not going to happen, but if Christian Pulisic stepped on the field for Real Madrid,
I don't think he would look out of place.
Exactly. So I think that says it all.
He had 15 goals and 11 assists last season, his most productive campaign in Europe. He seemingly is going to go to another level this season, but I do need to see this that he's doing right now for a little bit longer so we can establish that this is the new normal. It's not just a good stretch. If he can do that, then yeah, I mean, he enters the discussion as one of the best players at his position in all of Europe because he has been phenomenal. For those of you watching, the goal he scored against Inter this past weekend, scored against Liverpool the game before that. So yeah, I have no qualms saying it. Now, the issue you run into is there's nothing that the English like more than to proclaim that a player couldn't cut it in the Premier League, had to go to an inferior league to succeed, and has found his level. Now, I find to just summarize Christian Pulisic's time at Chelsea as, he couldn't play in the Premier League, I find that ridiculous. It's a lot more complicated, a lot more nuanced than that. You have to understand the context at Chelsea. Nevertheless, that's the argument you're going to get. Oh, sure, he's doing it in Serie A, but he couldn't do it in the Premier League.
Again, it goes back to, if Christian Pulisic were to be dropped into with Pep at Manchester City, he would have no problem. He would figure it out. So I am happy that Christian Pulisic's healthy. I'm happy that he's playing well. Who would you give in this discussion? Give me a comp, and relative to him playing for the U.S. men's national team, because I know a lot of people, when we think of Christian Pulisic and we see him playing this well, immediately our thoughts turn to, okay, can we see this type of performance on a continual basis in a very different circumstance playing for the U.S., and is he able to do that? And it's not as easy as that because it is a very type of different circumstance.
It's not, but keep in mind, he scored a beautiful free kick goal against Brazil this past summer, played very well in that game, scored a great goal against Germany late last year in that friendly in Hartford. So even with the U.S., he's starting to do it against some pretty good competition, albeit friendlies. But no, I think you could put him on the field against anybody right now, and he would like his chances of being able to produce.
Okay, so I think we agree that at this moment right now, Christian Pulisic, let it be known throughout the world, is world class.
Well, we don't all agree. Sean Sullivan is bullish that he isn't yet, because Sean's definition is you have to do it in the Champions League or in a World Cup and that type of setting. Now, keep in mind, Pulisic years ago did help Chelsea win the Champions League. Very good in the semis against Real Madrid. And he did just score against Liverpool in a Champions League game. So we might need Sean to come out here and explain his argument a little bit better. But he did tell me yesterday on our Zoom call and then right before we started taping that he comes down on no, Pulisic is not world class.
Wow. Well, I'd like to see his list of who is world class and how big and deep that list actually is.
Remember,
it's power rankings, if you will.
Every year, the Guardian comes out with a list of the top 100 players in the world. Last year, there was no American on the list. They used that as a jumping off point for this whole column about how the U.S.'s golden generation wasn't living up to its promise and why hasn't the U.S. produced yet a world-class star. I'll be curious to see where Pulisic places this year. If he's not in that top 100, then that would be absurd. But how high would they be willing to put an American? Because as I just said, England, there's a real sort of anti-American bias there with how they view the game. So we'll be able to keep an eye on that. You know what I was thinking about when we were thinking about this topic today? One of the most controversial moments in the history of this podcast, it happened way back in 2019. This is pre-Sean Sullivan. This is like Alex Dowd era. Carlos Vela was finishing up that MVP season with LAFC, 34 goals, 15 assists. And you said on this pod that he was one of the top 20 to 25 players in the world. And that blew everybody's mind. All the Euro snobs. How can you say that? How can an MLS player be ranked that high? And so when I teed you up today, I was hoping you would actually give out a number if Pulisic is among the blank top players in the world, just so we can get a VOD out, get everybody worked up.
No, if you look at Christian Pulisic in this moment, in what are we looking at? Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. I don't think you can argue that Christian Pulisic isn't one of the top 25 players playing the game right now in the world. And again, who knows? Maybe next week or then a few weeks from now, it's going to be completely different.
Yeah, that's why I say I want to see him maintain this for a little bit longer, because when you do it for an extended period of time, then it's not good form. Then that's the new normal. That's who you are. So he seemingly has taken his game to another level this season, but can he keep it going for the whole campaign and finish with like 25 goals and 13 assists, something like that? Then there's no discussion.
Well, that's the mark of quality. When I'm doing my power rankings, for example, the yo-yo types of teams, those aren't the really good teams. It's the ones that are there from the beginning, and maybe they move a little bit here and there, but they're always kind of around. Spain, for example, was that type of team this summer in terms of what we were doing.
Dortmund will host Eric Winalda's former club Bochum. Gio Reyna, we know, has been out with a groin injury. We did get an update. Nuri Sahin, the Dortmund manager, said that Gio is progressing faster than expected. Originally, they thought he was going to be out until after the October international break, but now he might be back before that, which raises the tantalizing question: if Gio gets on the field before that October window, would Pochettino include him in the squad, even though he's barely played this season?
I mean, or would Dortmund let him go? I mean, that would be the other thing. That's what I'm worried about. I don't care about Dortmund. I care about the U.S. men's national team. And if Gio is going to be a part of it, the more times he is involved, the better off it is for him and for Pochettino, especially now that this is that new era. And if I were any player, including Gio, and I know he's coming back from injury, I would want to get in front of Pochettino as soon as I possibly could, at the first possible chance that I got, which is going to be this. My worry is that if they start to at Dortmund, if he starts to get on the field and kind of come back, I think it's with the recognition that he's just coming back, and then they're going to say, hey, you need to slow it down because you're going to go and you're going to play these 2 games and you're going to travel and do all these different things. But I hope that he is with Pochettino in this first camp that Pochettino is running. So we'll see. It's good news that he's ahead of schedule, and I think if he is playing in these next couple of games before the window, even if it's in a substitute capacity, I'm assuming that's what it's going to be, get your ass on that plane and get over here for this window.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.